Hello everyone, my name is Rod Graham and this is a tutorial for your writing assignment, What Do Social Scientists Know About? So what you're seeing here is the instructions for your assignment. If you're in a Blackboard course, then you can get the instructions there. You'll also see 4 sample papers. They are 4 separate stages of a writing assignment from beginning to end. What I did was I completed this assignment. I wrote what I think is an A paper. And so what I'll do is first I'll start with the instructions and then I'll show you those stages and then you can follow along. This is a video, so you can pause it and then look at the actual PDF files, or you can just listen for right now and then on your own time look at the actual PDF files. So first let me start by going down the assignment and pointing out things that I think may be of interest. So this is a evidence-based research paper. Actually, you know what? I don't even like to use the term research paper, even though you're doing research, because when I say research paper, people immediately think about making sure that they have all the citations and they have as many references as possible, and they want it to sound very fancy and academic-y. That's actually not what I'm going for here. What I want you to do is write in an evidence-based paper that would be read by someone who knows nothing about the topic. You're doing something like science writing. And so you can read the instructions here. It needs to be between 3 and 5 pages. I think that's a good length for this. And you'll be getting your articles from the website, The Conversation. So what I'll be showing you is my writing process. And although I've got some restrictions here, the 3 to 5 pages and using the Conversation website, this process should go for any type of writing. So your paper has 5 components: the introduction, the topic, the article, and the conclusion. And then finally, you have to go back and make sure that you formatted it properly. And you can look at the weighting. And these are the formatting instructions. You can read that on your own. You look at the weighting, and you'll see that some things count more than others. In particular, the article summaries. This is the meat of your paper, and so that counts up to 40 points. Everything else counts 15 points each. Introduction, the topic, the conclusion, and even the formatting. I care that much about formatting that I'm gonna ask that it be at about 15 points. I'm starting to see that when students care about the format, that means that they care about the assignment, right? They want their product to look a certain way. Also, in professional life, everything that you submit, whatever it may be, there's going to be some requirements, and if you don't meet those requirements, then it's just not going to be accepted. I know, because I've written things for both academic articles and also for popular publications, and if it's not written in the format that they want, then they'll just reject it, desk reject it, meaning they don't even read it. They just see the format's not right and they'll send it back to you. That includes things like length. It also includes reference style, page numbers, all that stuff. Okay, so this is the assignment. Read that again on your own. What I'm going to do now is walk you through my writing process. And you can follow along and you can see the development of an essay from beginning to end. Now, what I like to do is, given the components of anything I'm writing, I like to then transfer those components to a separate sheet to start my paper. So here all I've done is I've just cut and paste the intro, the topic, the article, and the conclusion here. I don't have a title yet, but I'll have one eventually, right? And so I know that I need to complete each of these components. And then, of course, the 5th component is the format, but you don't put this here. So at this stage, you're brainstorming. You do some reading online, and I'm sure everyone has some idea of what they want to do, whatever it is. I teach a lot of criminology students, so a lot of their interest is in crime and deviance. So maybe something in that area. I also teach a lot of cyber students, so maybe they want to do something on technology. It really doesn't matter. You need to choose the thing that, in my opinion, is interesting for you, but also you may have a little background knowledge in. So you want to find a nice middle ground. And this is an iterative process, right? So you're going to have an idea, you're going to do some reading, and then maybe you change. So this is the first stage, right? Just setting up your scaffolding. And I think this is important. if you're, I don't know, building a house, baking a cake, writing a software program, you're always starting with a plan, and you're gathering your resources, or you're gathering your blocks of code, or you're getting your ingredients from the grocery store. It doesn't matter, but you're planning out something and putting things in place so that you can execute the project. All right, so the second part is to start filling this in. So at this stage of my writing, I decided that I wanted to do big data policing. And you can see in parentheses, I really wasn't sure whether I wanted to call it data-driven. Eventually, I settled on data-driven. But I started with this idea of big data policing. And so I already knew something about it, so it made it easier for me to start reading and thinking. So in this stage, I like to do bullet points, right? So I figured, all right, the intro has to be something that pulls people in, and explain like why I'm doing it, right? So I thought, well, all right, this is January 2021, and Joe Biden was just inaugurated as our 46th president. So, all right, fine. I'll start this way, and then I'll move into talking about him wanting to deal with systemic racism, and then that would justify using big data policing. This is the logic that goes on in these types of things. And it's sort of organic, right? I mean, I just kind of thought of that just thinking. I didn't really have to do a lot of background reading for that. I just knew I had to come up with something that would draw the reader in, because this assignment is for the reader, right? So, okay, after the introduction, you have the description of the topic. I think that this is something that people overlook, but you have to assume that the reader has a very low level of understanding. And so you then need to explain what this topic actually is. Like, how many people know what big data policing is? I mean, before you even get into talking about what researchers know about the issue, you have to first explain what the issue is, right? Or the topic in this case. And so what is big data policing, right? You have to do that. Also, at this time, I realized that I have systemic racism here, and I may need to define that. As my paper moved along, I realized that I didn't want to go down that road. I don't want to have to describe systemic racism and big data policing. I thought that for a paper of this size, I just need to focus on one thing. So you'll see in later drafts, I just simply erased it. But that's the thought process, right? So for the topic description, I went and I just read online, and I also knew from prior work that I had done how to describe this simply. And it's always good to use examples, right? So I give a definition here. Data-driven policing is blah, 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 blah. For you, you may want to find a quote somewhere. It's up to you. You may want to look in a textbook or go online. But you need to give a definition. And then I like examples to explain what's actually going on. So I gave 2 examples. Okay, and these are my examples. I don't have to quote, right? These are from me. So then you need the article summaries, and or at least at this stage, selecting the articles, and that in itself can be a process. Now, I'm going to show you the conversation. This is a publication that publishes research, or I should say articles, from academics, generally speaking. And the academics are writing about their own research or their own knowledge. So in some ways, you reading the articles will show you how you should write your own article, because they're writing what you are writing. You're just compiling several articles and writing a summary of all of those. And yours will be a little bit longer. So this is the conversation. It's wonderful. I've actually written a few pieces for the conversation. All right, so let's say I want to look up big data and policing. Actually, I've already done this, so I'll just use that. And let's see what I get. So I get this listing of things. And this is exactly what I did. I just then said, okay, this one looks interesting. I'll take it. Go to this one, and then get the web address so I can come back to it later. I'm sure I browsed it to make sure that it was useful, of course. And then I'll put it into my list of articles to read. which is what I did. That article is actually one of the ones that I used to write this paper. Now, big data policing is very narrow, and not a lot of people write on this. But what if I wanted to look up sexism? Let's see what happens here. So many articles have been written about sexism that the conversation has its own topic section for sexism. And even Donald Trump has 2,773 items written about him. That's quite amazing. But so sexism is 294 items, so you have a lot to choose from. Now, the thing about looking at these articles is, again, it's always an iterative process. For me, and I can go back now to my summaries, as I started collecting these and reading them, I realized that, okay, there are some keywords here that I will have to incorporate into my research. And I'll show you that on the next stage of my writing sample. But some students may think that you get the article and then you summarize the article and that's the end. But hopefully in summarizing the article, it helps you then develop other parts of your paper. So I had to eventually move out of just talking about big data analysis. I had to talk about things like predictive policing, and I understood that algorithms were important, and I had to explain that. So that all comes out in the wash when you're reading these article summaries. Okay, and then I haven't written the conclusion yet because that's at the end. So at stage 2, I start filling in the scaffolding. I do an introduction, I describe the topic, and then I start to collect my article summaries. This is the meat of the paper. And then I can't do the conclusion. Not yet. Okay, so here is the third stage of the project. Now, I haven't changed the introduction. If you've noticed, my reading of the summaries, of the articles, means that I'm having to think a little bit more about what I'm actually talking about. And this is normal. It should be this way, right? The more you learn, the more nuanced your understanding is. Okay, so what I've done, and you'll have this on your own PDF copy, is I have started to write things in, and I put them in red so I'll know that they're my thoughts, right? So say something about algorithms, say something about predictive policing, right? And I needed to do that, and I did. With the article summaries, to me, it's a straightforward process. I read the article and I just put the bullet points in. All right, he's saying this, he's saying that, he's saying that. I may not use all of this, but I just need to put what I think is important. And that's what I did. And you can read this on your own. But I did it for all 5 of the articles that I selected. Now you'll notice that there's some things in red. This is my thoughts, for example, in this paper here, the authors said that, a way forward is to make the algorithms transparent. And so I thought to myself, okay, I have to do a conclusion. So, hey, that to me is a nice, way of concluding the paper. Here's a way forward. Let's make algorithms transparent, right? This person here is sort of reiterating what that person said. So at that point I said, okay, algorithms have bias. That's a theme. That's something I got to talk about, right? This person, again, a theme, loss of civil liberties. You're doing this for 2 reasons. You need to justify why you are even including this article, right? Like, why even talk about it, right? You can't just talk about it simply because it has big data in the title or whatever your topic is in the title. I mean, it has to actually tell you something that is of use. And so these articles are useful for me. And the conversation is really good at making sure the articles are useful. But sometimes you may put something here and you realize, oh, this is not helping me at all. So you have to remove that one and get a new article to read. So, you just have to do that back and forth process. This is a good UK example. I realized that all of my other examples to this point were about the US. And of course, this is a worldwide thing. So this shows that this is international, this big data thing. More thoughts, way forward with human elements. And actually, I used these things, actually. And I have nothing here, but I did use this article. So once I read this stuff, I could then say, I could then start drawing some conclusions, right? And I sort of jotted those down, what I think are important. And I said, all right, it's more efficient, at least theoretically, and all of this is in the research articles now. So this is not my opinion yet. It's more efficient, less biased. It can be, but scholars are critical, of the objectivity, blah, 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 blah. All these things come out of the reading. Professors Pyrus and Dinsley. I love this quote. The opposite of bad data is not no data, but good data. So I kind of like that. And so I felt like that would be something I should use. By the way, since we're talking about quotes, it's okay to use quotes, but you want to use them judiciously, right? It's not something that you should just use to take up space in your paper. But some are very good. Sometimes you read something and you go, I can't say this any other way, or I want to show to the reader that I'm engaging with this scholarship and this professor, right? And so for this particular article, there were two quotes that I liked. If I can remember, did not use this one, but I did use this one. I like this one because it explains, how predictive policing can be more accurate, but also biased at the same time. So I took the whole article and the whole phrase, and I put it into my final article. And so now let's move to the final article, or essay, I guess I should say, my essay. And so I have a title, What Do Scientists Know About Data-Driven Policing? So I finally came to a title. Based upon everything that I read, do I want to go with big data? Do I want to go with predictive policing? Well, I decided that data-driven policing is the best way, right? And so I then, said, I don't want to use Joe Biden. I wasn't feeling it. All right, so I decided to take that out, and I decided to take a different approach. But it's still the same idea. You want to draw the reader in. This is for the reader, not for you to show how smart you are. In fact, by writing something that someone can read shows that you're smart enough to write something that someone can read, if that makes any sense. So I wanted to keep it kind of clear and straightforward. And I said, all right, Black Lives Matter, the deaths of these guys and girls were things that, people didn't like. And so we got to change policing, right? And one answer may be data-driven policing. That's the intro. Then I describe what it is. This is what data-driven policing is. Because I realized that algorithms were important and the idea of predictive policing, I had to kind of talk about this. For this reason, data-driven policing is often called predictive policing. I had to put that in there. I also had to talk about algorithms, because without those two things, then just saying, data-driven policing might not make any sense, right? So you have to make sure that you explain things. Also, because I didn't want to go too far in the weeds, and this is a relatively short paper of between 3 and 5 pages, I decided to just drop systemic racism. I didn't want to have to explain it. So instead, I found a way to say, well, it's just about bias, and not worry about explaining to people what systemic racism is. People can easily understand, okay, there's bias in policing. They're disproportionately policing black neighborhoods or disproportionately being aggressive towards black people, something of that nature, right? People get that easy. So after the introduction, I then have to develop a narrative based on my summaries. This is not a simple process of taking the bullet points and turning them into sentences. Now, you have to kind of tell a story here. And so you can do a compare and contrast. You can look back at my bullet points and then look at how I change those bullet points into paragraphs. But one thing that I try to do is I try to have some connector sentences and justification sentences. So if you look at the first sentence here, some scholars argue that the use of data-driven policing does not remove bias, but instead entrenches it. Okay, that's a theme. That then justifies me bringing up Isaac and Dixon's article and using a quote and then talking about what they talked about. Okay, then in the next paragraph, predictive policing is not only an issue in the United States. And you know what? This is actually probably the wrong word here. I probably should have said data-driven policing. But in any case, it's a connector, right? So I'm saying, all right, Isaac and Dixon, show us that, there's that scholars say that there's bias. But this is not just in the U.S. Here comes Professor Rowe here, who's explaining that this also goes on in the UK. So this justifies putting this in here and the argument naturally flows, right? Even here with the work of Andrew Ferguson, whose book I have, The Rise of Big Data Policing, so I could throw that in there. I say also, I'm making the argument that Ferguson is agreeing with Rowe, who's agreeing with Isaac and Dixon. Okay, and then I continue this theme here. Other scholars share the worry about the loss of civil liberties. But notice I'm making a shift. So I started talking about bias, and I said, okay, Rowe, first Isaac and Dixon talking about bias, and then Rowe does the same, just in the UK. Then I say that Ferguson also agrees, but also he's concerned about civil liberties, which now shifts the narrative and allows me to talk about Bernard's work. And he is also worried about civil liberties. And here I put in this nice quote, which I think is an awesome one. And so I continue with Bernard. And then I end with these CJ professors, Peruse and Dinsley, who, like Bernard, have a middle ground approach. They think that there's benefits, but we just have to do it better, right? So they don't want to eliminate gang databases. They think that we need them, and I do too, actually. But we just have to find a better way of collecting data and make it more systematic. So that's the story you're telling, right? So you take those bullet points and you turn them into a cohesive, flowing narrative that's written with the reader in mind. If you notice, I try to write without using a lot of big words, and I try to keep my sentences short, but not too short. If it gets choppy, it gets kind of monotonous, so you want to kind of vary the length. But you don't want these long sentences with all these clauses in it and prepositional phrases, and you don't really need all that. Okay, and then the conclusion. So the conclusion is really a restatement of what I've done here with my own little spin on it, right? So in theory, a person can read the conclusion and not read what you've done with the article summaries and still get the main point, right? That's a good conclusion. What I ask you to do in your assignment is to not only do that summarizing, but come up with some future implications or ways forward or something. And so I did this by grounding my conclusions in the work of the scholars. So I talk about transparency and constant human intervention. Well, I'm getting this from the work above, where one set of scholars said that we need to be transparent with our algorithms. And Dr. Rose says that, look, you know what, we just need, detectives have been doing this for years. And so in my mind, I thought, oh yeah, you know what, maybe a good way forward is to have this big data policing, but always make sure that the endpoint is a human who can apply a moral compass to the data. And so that's what I did, and that's the paper. Now, to wrap this up, you want to make sure that you have the format correct. I want you to use APA. In a good way, given that all of this is are web resources, you can use this, which is in your instructions. You can just put the conversation URL here and follow the prompts, and it will give you an output in APA format. You can just simply cut and paste that into the assignment. That's what I did, right? So you've got your references, page numbers at the bottom. It's double spaced. It's between 3 and 5 pages. It's a sweet spot. It's at 4 pages exactly. My name is in the right corner and date. This is Saturday morning on the 23rd, 2021 that I'm doing this, and so I put the date. And yeah, I think that's it. This is an A paper. It's not perfect. In fact, as I was browsing it, I realized that I probably could have changed some things. But I think it's something that a student can aim for, and if they produce work of this quality, they will get an A on this assignment. Okay, I hope that this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please email me.